I never expected that a simple trip to First National Bank would change everything. At 68, I thought I'd seen enough of life's cruelties, but nothing prepared me for what happened at that marble counter on a Tuesday morning in October. "Mom, we really need to get your finances organized," Michael had said over the phone the night before. His voice carried that strained tone I'd grown to recognize whenever Jennifer was nearby, listening to every word. "Jennifer thinks it would be best if we set up some arrangements, to protect you. Protect me." The words sat heavy in my stomach as I dressed that morning, choosing my best navy dress, the one Richard had always said made my eyes sparkle. I wanted to look respectable for whatever this meeting was about, though something in Michael's voice had made my hands shake as I applied my lipstick. The bank lobby buzzed with morning activity when we arrived. Jennifer swept in wearing a designer coat that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile sharp as winter wind. She barely acknowledged me with a nod, immediately moving to the reception desk like she owned the place. "We have an appointment with Mr. Davidson."
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching,
she announced to the young teller, her voice carrying that particular authority she'd perfected over the 5 years she'd been married to my son. "It's regarding some family financial matters that need immediate attention." Michael stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. My successful lawyer son, who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared him, now couldn't quite meet my eyes. The change in him over the past few years had been gradual but devastating. Where once he'd call me twice a week just to chat, now our conversations were reduced to obligatory holiday check-ins and these mysterious family meetings that Jennifer orchestrated. "Please take a seat," the teller said politely. "Mr. Davidson will be with you shortly." We settled into the leather chairs in the waiting area, the silence between us thick and uncomfortable. I watched other customers come and go, young couples opening their first joint accounts, elderly men making deposits, business people conducting transactions with quiet efficiency. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that mine was about to shatter completely. "Mrs. Wilson," Jennifer said suddenly, her voice just loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "I hope you understand that what we're doing today is really for your own good. Michael and I have been so worried about you managing on your own." The condescension in her tone made my cheeks burn, managing on my own, as if I hadn't raised Michael single-handedly after his father walked out when the boy was 12, as if I hadn't worked 2 jobs to put him through law school, as if I hadn't built a life of quiet dignity that required no one's pity or management. "I managed just fine, dear," I replied softly, though my voice carried more steel than I intended. Jennifer's laugh was like ice cracking. "Oh, I'm sure you think you do. But Michael's told me about the bills you've been struggling with, the little mistakes you've been making. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Happens to everyone your age." Bills I'd been struggling with? Mistakes? I stared at my son, waiting for him to correct her, to defend me, to remember who I really was. But Michael just shifted in his chair and examined his expensive watch. "The thing is," Jennifer continued, warming to her audience as other customers began to glance our way, "we can't keep enabling this fantasy. Michael has his own family to think about now, his career, our future children. We simply can't keep throwing money at problems that will only get worse." Each word hit me like a physical blow. Enabling fantasy, throwing money, problems that would only get worse. She was painting a picture of me as a burden, a failing old woman who couldn't face reality. And she was doing it publicly, methodically, with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. "Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Davidson will see you now," the teller announced. We rose and moved toward the private banking area, past the marble counter where several tellers processed transactions for a growing line of customers. The morning rush was beginning, and the lobby filled with the quiet sounds of business being conducted. Keyboard clicks, hushed conversations, the whisper of papers being shuffled. As we approached the counter area, Jennifer's phone buzzed. She answered immediately, her voice dropping into that sweetly professional tone she used for her real estate clients. "Oh yes, Mrs. Chen, I completely understand your concerns about the property value." She moved a few steps away, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. This left Michael and me standing at the counter, waiting. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled at us politely. "Are you here for the trust documentation appointment?" "Trust documentation?" I echoed, confusion washing over me. Michael's face reddened slightly. It's just some paperwork, Mom. Some legal protections we think would be good for you to have in place. Before I could ask what kind of protections, Jennifer returned, snapping her phone shut with satisfaction. She looked around the busy counter area, noting the other customers within earshot, and something cold and calculating flickered in her eyes. "Sorry about that," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Just had to reassure another client about their investment. Some people get so worried about money when they don't understand how these things work." She turned to me with that practiced smile, but her voice carried clearly across the marble space. "Speaking of which, Margaret, I hope you're not getting any ideas about what this meeting means. I know how confused you get about financial matters." The customers around us began to take notice. A businessman in line glanced over with mild interest. An elderly couple at the next window slowed their conversation to listen. Even the tellers seemed to tune in to the drama unfolding at the counter. "I'm not confused about anything," I said quietly, but my voice seemed to disappear in the vast marble space. Jennifer laughed again, that sharp sound that cut through the bank's hushed atmosphere like a knife. "Oh, sweetheart, you absolutely are. You've been living in this little bubble where you think you matter, where you think you have some kind of resources. But the truth is, you're just an old woman living on Social Security who can't accept that her son has moved on." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward us, watching this public dissection of my dignity. The businessman tried to pretend he wasn't listening. The elderly couple exchanged glances that mixed pity with discomfort. Even the tellers had stopped their work to observe this family drama playing out in their professional space. "Jennifer," Michael said quietly, finally finding his voice, "maybe we should—" "No, Michael," she interrupted, her confidence building with her audience. "Your mother needs to hear this. She needs to understand her place in our lives going forward." She turned back to me, her voice now carrying across the entire counter area. "You see, Margaret, the fantasy ends today. You think you have money? You think you have influence? You think you matter?" The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This woman, who had eaten at my table, who had accepted my birthday gifts, who had smiled and called me Mom at family gatherings, was systematically destroying me in front of strangers. She laughed one more time, the sound echoing off the marble walls. "Give her $1 and send her away." The counter fell silent. The businessman's mouth had dropped open slightly. The elderly couple looked genuinely distressed. Even the tellers seemed frozen, unsure how to respond to such public cruelty. I stood there, my navy dress suddenly feeling like rags, my careful makeup feeling like a child's attempt at playing dress-up. At 68 years old, I was being dismissed, diminished, reduced to nothing more than a nuisance to be handled with pocket change. But then Mr. Davidson appeared beside us, tablet in hand, his expression professional but puzzled by the tension he'd obviously witnessed. "Mrs. Wilson," he said respectfully, "we have the documentation ready for your signature. The transfer papers you requested are prepared and waiting for authorization." Transfer papers. I looked at the tablet he extended toward me, then at Jennifer's confident face, then at my son's confused expression. "Yes," I said quietly, taking the stylus with steady hands. "I believe it's time." As I signed my name with careful precision, the counter around us seemed to hold its breath. The stylus felt surprisingly light in my hand as I signed my name on the tablet's smooth surface. Around us, the bank counter remained frozen in that awful silence that follows public humiliation. I could feel Jennifer's smug satisfaction radiating beside me like heat from a furnace. She had gotten exactly what she wanted, a public demonstration of my powerlessness, my irrelevance, my complete dependence on her charity. "There," I said quietly, handing the tablet back to Mr. Davidson. "I believe that completes everything." Jennifer was already turning away, clearly bored now that the entertainment was over. "Well, that's settled then," she said to Michael, loud enough for our audience to hear. "We can finally move forward without any more drama." But Davidson hadn't moved. He was staring at the tablet screen, his professional composure cracking slightly around the edges. His finger tapped the screen once, twice, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. He said, his voice suddenly uncertain. "Mrs. Wilson, could you please confirm that this authorization is correct?" He turned the tablet toward me and I nodded calmly. "Yes, that's exactly right." "What authorization?" Jennifer asked, irritation creeping into her voice. She was clearly ready to leave, to move on to whatever lunch appointment or shopping trip would occupy her afternoon. This little detour to put me in my place was supposed to be finished by now. Mr. Davidson looked between Jennifer and me, then at Michael, who was watching this exchange with growing confusion. "I think," he said carefully, "there may have been some misunderstanding about the nature of today's meeting." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Michael asked, stepping closer to the counter. Mr. Davidson's finger moved across the tablet screen, and suddenly the monitor behind the counter flickered to life. Numbers began cascading across the display: account numbers, transaction codes, authorization sequences. The screen filled with data that meant nothing to most people, but everything to a bank. And then, in clear digital print that seemed to glow against the dark screen, the final number appeared: $1,247,000, 0 transfer authorized. The counter area fell into a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Jennifer's confident smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion that quickly shifted to something approaching panic. Michael stared at the screen as if it might suddenly make sense, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something his mind could process. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, her voice smaller now. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." Mr. Davidson cleared his throat professionally. "No mistake, Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Wilson has just authorized the transfer of $1.247 billion to the Margaret Elizabeth Wilson Foundation for Elder Protection and Dignity." He paused, consulting his tablet again. "It's the largest single philanthropic transfer in our institution's history." The businessman, who had been pretending not to listen, dropped his deposit slip. The elderly couple at the next window turned completely around to stare. Even the tellers had stopped their work entirely, creating an almost reverent hush in the marble space. "That's impossible," Jennifer whispered, but her voice carried no conviction anymore. I smoothed my navy dress and looked at her directly for the first time since we'd arrived. "Is it, dear?" The color was draining from her face in real time, like watching someone age a decade in seconds. "You don't have that kind of money. You live in that tiny apartment. You shop at discount stores. You clip coupons." "Yes, I do all of those things," I agreed calmly. "I've always believed in living simply. My late husband Richard taught me that true wealth isn't about what you display, but what you do with what you have." Michael was still staring at the screen as if it might change if he looked hard enough. "Mom," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "I don't understand." Mr. Davidson, sensing the family drama unfolding, stepped in with practiced diplomacy. "Perhaps we should move to a private office to discuss the details." "No," I said firmly. "I think we've had quite enough privacy in our family dealings. Everything important in my life seems to happen in public these days." I turned to face the small crowd that had gathered around us. The businessman, the elderly couple, several other customers, and even some of the bank staff had formed a loose circle around our counter. They all looked fascinated and slightly uncomfortable, as if they'd accidentally stumbled into someone else's family crisis. "You see," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the hushed space, "my daughter-in-law has spent the last few minutes explaining to all of you that I'm a poor, confused old woman who doesn't understand money or her place in the world." Jennifer made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. "She's told you that I'm a burden on my successful son, that I live in fantasy, that I need to be managed like a child." I gestured toward the screen, where those impossible numbers still glowed. "I thought it might be educational for everyone to see just how confused I really am about financial matters." The elderly woman at the next window began to smile. Not a kind smile, something sharper, more satisfied. The businessman was openly grinning now, clearly enjoying this reversal of fortune. "The Margaret Elizabeth Wilson Foundation," I continued, "will focus specifically on protecting elderly individuals from financial abuse and emotional manipulation by family members. It seems there's quite a need for such services these days." Michael was shaking his head slowly, like someone trying to wake up from a strange dream. "Mom, I had no idea. How long have you... when did you... Your father and I were very fortunate in our investments," I said simply. "We started with a small inheritance from my grandmother and made some wise choices over the years. Richard always insisted we live modestly and give generously." "But you never said anything," Michael protested. All these years, you let us think. I let you think what? I interrupted gently. That I was your mother who loved you? That I was a woman who had raised you to be kind and respectful? That I had taught you to value people for their character rather than their bank accounts? Michael's face crumpled as the full weight of his failures hit him. Oh God, Mom, what have I done? Jennifer was backing away from the counter now, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. This is insane, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You're all insane. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Davidson said politely, I'm going to need you to sign some witness documentation for the transfer. Bank policy requires signatures from all parties present during large philanthropic transactions. I'm not signing anything, Jennifer snapped, but she had stopped moving away from us. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a manila folder that had been waiting there all morning. I think you'll find this quite interesting. I handed the folder to Michael, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, bank statements, receipts, and a detailed timeline that my private investigator had compiled over the past 6 months. What is this? Michael asked, though his face suggested he was beginning to understand. Evidence, I said simply. Proof of how your wife has been systematically isolating you from me, manipulating your perceptions, and creating a false narrative about my mental and financial state. Jennifer's eyes darted toward the exit, but the crowd around us had grown larger. Word was spreading through the bank about the billionaire grandmother and her cruel daughter-in-law. People were pulling out phones, taking pictures, recording videos. This moment was going to live forever in digital space. The credit card bills in your name that you didn't authorize, I continued, watching Michael flip through the papers. The intercepted phone calls and letters, the appointments she canceled without telling you, the lies she told your colleagues about my supposed dementia. Michael's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the folder. Jennifer, please tell me this isn't true. But Jennifer had found her voice again, and it came out as pure venom. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think this little stunt changes anything? She turned to address the crowd that surrounded us, her social media instincts kicking in even in crisis. You're all witnessing elder abuse, she announced dramatically. This woman is clearly mentally incompetent, giving away money she doesn't understand to spite her own family. The elderly woman at the next window spoke up for the first time. Honey, the only abuse I've witnessed here today is you telling everyone this lady should be given $1 and sent away. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several people nodded emphatically. That's taken out of context, Jennifer protested, but her voice was getting shriller. What context makes that acceptable? The businessman asked. I heard the whole thing. You were deliberately cruel to her. Mr. Davidson stepped forward diplomatically. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we should allow the family some privacy to— No, I said again. Privacy is what allowed this situation to develop in the first place. Privacy is what my daughter-in-law has been using as a weapon against me for years. I turned to face Jennifer directly. You wanted to humiliate me publicly, dear. You wanted to reduce me to nothing in front of strangers. Well, here we are. Public. How do you feel about that now? The screen behind us still displayed those glowing numbers. $147,000. Window transfer authorized. Jennifer's perfectly applied makeup was beginning to run. Not from tears. I don't think she was capable of genuine tears, but from sweat and stress. Her carefully constructed world was falling apart in real time, and everyone was watching. This isn't over, she whispered. You're absolutely right, I agreed. It's not over. It's just beginning. The drive home from the bank passed in suffocating silence. Michael gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white, while Jennifer stared out the passenger window like a statue. I sat in the back seat, watching the familiar streets of our small town roll by, knowing that everything had changed forever in the span of 20 minutes. My phone had been buzzing constantly since we left First National. Word travels fast in a town of 30,000 people, and apparently half of them had friends or relatives who worked at the bank. By the time we reached Michael's driveway, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Mom, Michael said finally, his voice hoarse. He turned to face me from the front seat, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. We need to talk. Jennifer whipped around to glare at him. We need to figure out how to fix this disaster. That's what we need to do. Fix it? Michael stared at his wife as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Fix what exactly? The fact that my mother is a billionaire philanthropist, or the fact that you just humiliated her in front of half the town? Don't you dare turn this around on me, Jennifer snapped. Your mother has been lying to us for years. Years, Michael. Do you understand what that means? I leaned forward slightly from the back seat. What it means, dear, is that I chose to live according to my values rather than my bank account. Something you might want to consider trying. Jennifer's laugh was sharp and bitter. Your values? You let me think you were poor. You let me pay for dinners, for gifts, for— She stopped abruptly, her face going pale as she realized what she was admitting. For what? Michael asked quietly. But Jennifer had caught herself. Nothing. It doesn't matter now. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Martha Chen, my neighbor of 15 years. Her text was simple. Saw the news. Call me when you can. So proud of you. The news. I wondered how many versions of today's events were already spreading through town. In my experience, stories grew and changed with each telling, like flowers blooming in different directions. Mom, Michael said again, I need to understand. When Dad died 5 years ago, you let me help with the funeral expenses. You let me think you were struggling. You needed to help, I said gently. You were grieving your father, and you needed to feel useful, needed. Taking care of me gave you purpose during a very dark time. But it was all fake. Your grief wasn't fake. Your love for your father wasn't fake. Your desire to take care of me wasn't fake. I paused, choosing my words carefully. The only thing that was false was your assumption about my financial situation. Jennifer was scrolling through her phone now, her face growing more panicked with each swipe. Oh God, she whispered. It's everywhere. The video is everywhere. What video? Michael asked. Someone recorded the whole thing at the bank. It's already on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. The hashtag is trending. She looked up at us with wild eyes. Billionaire grandma revenge. People are calling me a monster. I felt a small stab of satisfaction, followed immediately by guilt. I hadn't wanted to destroy Jennifer completely. I had simply wanted her to understand that actions have consequences. What are they saying? Michael asked, reaching for her phone. Jennifer jerked it away from him. Nothing good. They're calling me a gold digger, a narcissist, an elder abuser. Someone found my real estate license, and they're posting my work address. My phone buzzed with another call. This time it was Dr. Patricia Williams, my longtime physician and friend. I answered it. Margaret Wilson, you absolute legend, Patricia said without preamble. I just watched the most satisfying video of my entire medical career. Patricia, Don't you dare apologize. That girl had it coming and everyone knows it. Do you have any idea how many times I've heard stories like yours? Elderly patients being emotionally abused by family members who think they're worthless? Her voice was fierce with professional anger. What you did today was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I could hear Jennifer listening to every word, her breathing getting more shallow with each sentence. Thank you, I said simply. Listen, I'm calling because my phone has been ringing off the hook. Local news wants to interview you, and there's already interest from some national programs. You've become a symbol, Margaret, a symbol of fighting back. After I hung up, Michael was staring at me with something approaching awe. Mom, do you realize what you've done? I've established a foundation to help protect vulnerable elderly people from financial and emotional abuse, I said matter-of-factly. I thought that was rather obvious. That's not what I mean. He shook his head slowly. You've become famous. This story is going to be everywhere. Jennifer made a choking sound. Famous for destroying my life. You destroyed your own life, Michael said, his voice harder than I'd heard it in years. You spent 5 years lying to me about my mother. 5 years, Jennifer, making me believe she was failing, that she was becoming a burden, that she didn't care about us anymore. I was protecting you. From what? Michael's voice rose. From having a relationship with the woman who raised me? From knowing that my mother is one of the most successful people in this town? From understanding that she chose to live simply because she has actual values? The silence that followed was broken by Jennifer's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen, and her face went white. Who is it? Michael asked. My boss, at the real estate office. Her voice was barely a whisper. She didn't answer the call, but immediately her phone started buzzing with text messages. I could see her face crumpling as she read them. What does it say? Michael pressed. I'm suspended pending investigation, she said hollowly. The company doesn't want to be associated with negative publicity. I felt another stab of satisfaction, followed by a deeper well of sadness. This young woman had made her choices, but watching someone's world collapse was never truly pleasant, even when they deserved it. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number with a New York area code. Mrs. Wilson? This is Sarah Martinez from Good Morning America. We'd love to discuss having you on the show to talk about elder advocacy and your remarkable foundation. I looked at Michael and Jennifer, both staring at me with expressions of shock and disbelief. That sounds wonderful, I said into the phone. I'd be delighted to discuss the foundation. After scheduling the interview, I hung up and looked at my son. Michael, I want you to know that none of this was about revenge. It was about dignity, about showing people that elderly Americans deserve respect, not dismissal. But you planned this, he said, still processing. The foundation, the timing, everything. I've been planning the foundation for months, I admitted. Your father and I always intended to give away the majority of our wealth. We just wanted to wait until we were certain it would go to the right causes. And today? Today I realized that I had become the very type of person the foundation was designed to help. An elderly woman being manipulated and diminished by family members who saw her as inconvenient. Jennifer looked up from her phone, tears streaming down her face now. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration. You set me up, she said. You deliberately let me humiliate myself. No, dear, I said gently. I gave you every opportunity to show kindness. You chose cruelty instead. Michael turned in his seat to face his wife fully. Jennifer, I need to know. How long have you been intercepting Mom's calls? I wasn't intercepting. Don't lie to me, not anymore. His voice was deadly quiet. I found the folder Mom showed us. The phone records. The documentation. How long? Jennifer's shoulders sagged in defeat. Since we got married. But it wasn't malicious, Michael. I was trying to help you establish boundaries. Your mother was too involved in your life. Too involved? Michael's voice cracked. She was my mother. She raised me alone after Dad left. She put me through law school. And you decided she was too involved? She was holding you back from your potential. Stop. Michael held up his hand. Just stop talking. The car fell silent again except for Jennifer's quiet crying. I looked out the window at the house I had visited countless times over the years, for birthday parties, holiday dinners, quiet Sunday afternoons when Michael and I would work in the garden together, before Jennifer decided that I was an inconvenience to be managed. Mom, Michael said softly, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for everything. I know you are, sweetheart. I let her turn me against you. I let her make me believe that you were becoming a problem. You were being manipulated by someone you trusted, I said. That's not your fault. Yes, it is. His voice was firm now. I'm a grown man. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you instead of protecting my marriage. My phone buzzed with another text. This one was from James Morton, the editor of our local newspaper. Margaret, would you be willing to do an interview about elder rights and family dynamics? After today's events, I think our readers would be very interested in your perspective. I showed the text to Michael, who read it and shook his head in amazement. You're going to be busier than ever, he said. Good, I replied. I have a lot of work to do. Jennifer looked up from her phone one more time. You've ruined everything, she said, but there was no fire left in her voice. Only exhaustion. No, I said quietly. I've started something important. Something that might prevent other families from going through what we've gone through. As we sat there in the driveway, I realized that this was just the beginning. The foundation would need to be properly established, staffed, funded beyond my initial donation. There would be interviews, speaking engagements, opportunities to educate people about the realities of elder abuse. But more immediately, there would be the work of rebuilding my relationship with my son and figuring out what came next for all of us. The reckoning was far from over. That evening, I sat in my small apartment looking through the boxes of evidence I had compiled over the past 6 months. Each folder told a story of systematic manipulation that had been so gradual, so carefully orchestrated, that even I hadn't fully understood its scope until I began documenting it. The earliest folder was labeled Year 1, The foundation. Inside were photos from Michael and Jennifer's wedding, newspaper clippings announcing their engagement, and copies of the thank you notes Jennifer had written after their honeymoon. Such lovely notes filled with gratitude and affection. "Thank you for raising such a wonderful son," one read. "I promise to take good care of him." How sincere she had seemed then. How committed to being part of our family. I remembered the first red flag, though I hadn't recognized it as such at the time. It was 3 months after the wedding, during what should have been our traditional Sunday dinner. Michael and I had been having these dinners every week since his father left, just the two of us, talking about his cases, my volunteer work at the library, whatever book I was reading. Simple, comfortable conversations that I treasured. "Mom," Michael had said that particular Sunday, fidgeting with his napkin in a way that reminded me of his teenage years, "Jennifer and I have been talking, and we think maybe we should make Sunday dinners more irregular." "Irregular?" I had repeated, confused. "You know, not every week, maybe once a month or so. Jennifer says it's important for married couples to establish their own traditions." Jennifer had smiled sweetly from across my dining room table. "I hope you understand, Margaret. It's nothing personal. It's just that Michael and I need time to build our own life together." I had nodded and smiled because what else could I do? She wasn't wrong, technically. Newlyweds did need time together, but something about the way she said it, the way she positioned herself as the voice of wisdom about relationships, had felt uncomfortable. The second folder was thicker. Year 2, the isolation. This contained printed emails, phone records, and witness statements from neighbors who had seen Jennifer intercepting my mail and packages. The phone calls had been the first casualty. Michael used to call me 2 or 3 times a week, usually in the evenings after work. We would chat about nothing important, a funny story from his office, a book recommendation, weekend plans, but those calls had become less frequent after the wedding, and by the second year, they had virtually disappeared. "Mom's getting clingy," I had overheard Jennifer telling someone on the phone one afternoon when I arrived early for a dinner invitation. "She calls Michael constantly at work, and it's really affecting his concentration. I'm trying to help him set some boundaries." Clingy. The word had stung because it was so false. I had never called Michael at work unless it was an emergency. In fact, I had been careful not to intrude on his professional life, understanding how hard he worked to build his practice. But Jennifer's version of events was more compelling than mine, apparently. When I mentioned to Michael that I rarely called him at work, he looked confused. "Really? Jennifer said you'd been calling the office several times a week." I had let it go then, assuming there had been some misunderstanding. Now, I knew better. Jennifer had been calling his office herself, identifying herself as me, asking personal questions and making requests that would annoy his colleagues. She had been creating the very problem she claimed to be solving. The third folder contained the most painful evidence. Year 3, the sabotage. Medical appointments canceled without my knowledge. Birthday dinners moved to dates when I couldn't attend. Holiday invitations that somehow never reached me. "I'm so sorry you missed Michael's birthday dinner," my friend Martha had said after running into me at the grocery store. "Jennifer said you weren't feeling well." I hadn't been invited to Michael's birthday dinner. When I called to ask about it, Jennifer answered the phone with syrupy concern. "Oh, Margaret, I'm so sorry. We thought you might be overwhelmed by a big celebration. You seemed tired the last time we saw you." Tired. Another word carefully chosen to suggest decline, weakness, inability to participate in normal family life. The pattern had been so subtle, so consistent that even I had begun to doubt myself. Maybe I was becoming forgetful. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. Maybe I was asking too much of my son and his new wife. The fourth folder was labeled Year 4, the narrative. This contained screenshots of Jennifer's social media posts where she had begun crafting a public story about her difficult mother-in-law. "Some days I feel more like a caregiver than a daughter-in-law," read one Facebook post from that time. "It's so hard when elderly family members refuse to accept help or admit they're struggling." The post had received dozens of sympathetic comments from Jennifer's friends and colleagues. "You're such a saint for putting up with that. Have you considered assisted living options? Some people just can't accept reality." I had seen the post because Martha's daughter was friends with Jennifer on social media. When Martha showed it to me, I had felt something cold settle in my stomach. Jennifer was telling the world that I was declining, that I was difficult, that I was a burden she nobly endured. None of it was true, but truth mattered less than narrative. Jennifer understood something that I was only beginning to grasp. In our connected world, perception becomes reality very quickly. The fifth folder contained the evidence that had finally pushed me to action. Year 5, the endgame. Phone records showing intercepted calls, canceled medical appointments that I never knew about, and most damning of all, a series of emails between Jennifer and a local assisted living facility. "I'm inquiring about availability for my mother-in-law," the first email read. "She's becoming increasingly unable to care for herself, though she doesn't recognize it yet. We're hoping to make arrangements before the situation becomes critical." Before the situation becomes critical, as if my independence was a medical emergency waiting to happen. The facility had responded with brochures and pricing information. Jennifer had scheduled tours. She had researched transportation services and legal guardianship procedures. She had been planning to have me declared incompetent and removed from my own life, all while smiling at family dinners and calling me Mom. I closed the folders and looked around my small apartment. Jennifer had been right about one thing. I did live simply. The furniture was comfortable but not expensive. The art on the walls was prints, not originals. My car was 10 years old and ran perfectly well. I had chosen this life deliberately. After Richard's death, I could have moved to a mansion, could have surrounded myself with luxury and status symbols. Instead, I had kept our modest apartment and used our wealth to help others quietly. Anonymous donations to scholarships, medical bills paid for struggling families, small business loans that never needed to be repaid. Richard and I had believed that money was a tool, not a trophy. We had seen too many wealthy people become trapped by their possessions, defined by their net worth rather than their character. We had wanted something different, but my simplicity had made me vulnerable to Jennifer's manipulation. She had assumed that my modest lifestyle reflected modest means, and she had built her entire campaign against me on that assumption. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Michael. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened today, and I need to ask you some things." "Of course." "The Sunday dinners. When did we stop having them regularly?" I could hear the pain in his voice as the memories began to connect. "About 3 months after your wedding, Jennifer said you needed to establish your own traditions." "I never said that. I loved our Sunday dinners." "I know you did." A long pause. "The birthday dinner last year. Jennifer said you weren't feeling well." "I was never invited, Michael." Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh God, the Christmas when you didn't come because of the snowstorm." "There was no snowstorm that day, sweetheart. It was 60 degrees and sunny." I could hear him crying now, soft sounds of realization and regret. "She lied about everything, didn't she?" "Not everything. I'm sure she loves you. But yes, she lied about almost everything involving me." "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you fight back sooner?" I considered the question carefully. "Because I was afraid of losing you completely. Jennifer had made it clear that if I caused problems, if I made waves, she would make sure you chose her over me. And I thought you would choose her." "I probably would have," he admitted quietly. "Back then, I believed everything she told me. I trusted her completely, as you should have been able to. Trust is fundamental to marriage, but she used that trust to hurt you, to hurt us." We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the full scope of what had been done to our family. "Mom, I want to make this right. I want to fix what's been broken." "It's not broken beyond repair," I said gently, "but it will take time, and it will require Jennifer to acknowledge what she's done. I don't think she's capable of that." I thought about Jennifer's performance at the bank, her immediate shift into victim mode, her complete inability to take responsibility for her actions. "Perhaps not," I agreed, "but that's her choice to make. What matters now is what choice you make." "I choose you, Mom. I choose our family. I choose the truth." After we hung up, I returned to my folders of evidence. Tomorrow, there would be interviews, meetings with foundation lawyers, discussions about how to structure an organization that could help other families avoid what we had been through. But tonight, I simply sat with the weight of 5 years of systematic manipulation, feeling both the pain of what had been lost and the hope of what might be rebuilt. The pattern was clear now. Jennifer hadn't acted impulsively or accidentally. She had carefully, methodically worked to erase me from my son's life. She had been playing a long game, and she had nearly won. Nearly. The Good Morning America interview aired on Thursday morning, 3 days after the bank incident. I sat in my living room watching myself on television, still somewhat stunned by how quickly everything had spiraled into national attention. So Margaret, the host, Sarah Martinez, had asked with genuine warmth, "What would you say to other elderly Americans who might be experiencing similar treatment from family members?" "I would say that your worth isn't determined by your bank account, your age, or what others think you should contribute," I had replied. "And I would say that it's never too late to stand up for yourself with dignity." The interview had been watched by over 2 million people. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since, but this morning, the ringing was different, desperate, frantic. "Mrs. Wilson, this is Jennifer. Please, I need to talk to you." I had been expecting this call since yesterday, when Michael told me he had asked Jennifer to move out temporarily while they figured things out. Her parents lived 3 states away, and most of her local friends had distanced themselves since the viral video. "What can I do for you, dear? I need you to fix this." Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying for days. "The foundation, the interviews, all of it. You need to tell people that this was all a misunderstanding." I settled into my favorite chair, the one Richard had bought me for my 60th birthday. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "That I'm not a monster, that I was just trying to protect Michael from family drama, that I never meant to hurt anyone." Through my window, I could see Mrs. Patterson from next door tending her garden. She had knocked on my door yesterday with a casserole and a story about her own daughter-in-law's behavior. "Been waiting 20 years for someone to do what you did," she had said with satisfaction. "Jennifer," I said gently, "I can't tell people something that isn't true." "But it is true." The desperation in her voice was painful to hear. "I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to help Michael succeed. You don't understand the pressure he's under, the expectations in his profession. Having family complications can really hurt a lawyer's career." Family complications. Even now, even in her desperate state, she couldn't bring herself to see me as a person rather than a problem to be managed. "What exactly did you think was complicated about Michael having a relationship with his mother?" A long pause. "You don't understand what it's like being married to someone who's so close to their parent. Everyone always comparing me to you, asking why I can't cook like Margaret, why I don't have your patience, your wisdom. I felt like I was competing with a saint." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a genuine pang of sympathy for Jennifer. I remembered being a young wife myself, insecure and uncertain, worried that I would never measure up to Richard's expectations or his mother's example. "Competition wasn't necessary," I said softly. "There was room in Michael's life for both of us." "No, there wasn't." Her voice became harder, more defensive. "He called you every day, Margaret. He asked your opinion about everything, our apartment, our furniture, even our vacation plans. I felt like a third wheel in my own marriage." I frowned, because this didn't match my memory at all. "Jennifer, Michael called me perhaps twice a week, and usually just to check in. I never gave unsolicited advice about your decisions. That's not how it felt." And there it was, the fundamental problem. Jennifer's perception had become her reality, and she had acted on that perception without ever questioning whether it was accurate. "How it felt to you became more important than how it actually was," I said. "You're twisting everything around," she snapped, the desperation shifting into anger. "You're making me out to be some kind of villain when all I did was try to build a marriage. By lying to your husband about his mother for 5 years? By protecting him from manipulation." "What manipulation, Jennifer? Be specific." Another pause. "The way you made him feel guilty if he didn't call? The way you expected him to visit every Sunday? The way you acted hurt when we made our own plans?" I closed my eyes, trying to remember any instance of guilt-tripping or manipulation on my part. I came up empty. "Jennifer, I never expected anything from Michael. When he called, I was delighted. When he didn't, I assumed he was busy with his own life, which is exactly how it should be." "That's not. You don't remember it the way I do." "No, I don't, because my version is documented. I kept calendars, phone records, emails. I can show you exactly how often we communicated and who initiated contact." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she had hung up. "The foundation," she said finally, her voice smaller now. "Do you really need to keep it going? Haven't you made your point?" "My point, that you're powerful, that you can hurt people who cross you, that you're not someone to be messed with." I felt a flash of anger then, sharp and bright. Jennifer, the foundation isn't about you. It's about the thousands of elderly Americans who are being emotionally abused by family members every single day. It's about creating resources and support systems so that other people don't have to go through what I went through. But my life is ruined, she whispered. Your reputation is damaged, I corrected. Your life is your own to rebuild. How? Everyone in town knows what happened. I lost my job. My friends won't return my calls. Michael won't even look at me. I thought about the young woman who had written me such lovely thank you notes after her wedding. Somewhere underneath all the manipulation and cruelty, that person might still exist. You could start by taking responsibility for your actions, I suggested. Not excuses, not justifications. Actual responsibility. I was trying to protect my marriage. You were trying to control your marriage. There's a difference. My phone beeped with another call. The caller ID showed Michael's number. Jennifer, I need to take another call. But I want you to think about something. You spent 5 years trying to erase me from Michael's life. Did it make him happier? Did it make your marriage stronger? I don't know. I think you do know. I think that's why you're so desperate now. I switched to Michael's call. Mom, I'm at the house packing some of Jennifer's things. I found something I think you need to see. What is it? Letters. Dozens of them. Letters you sent to me over the years that I never received. My heart sank. What kind of letters? Birthday cards, Christmas cards, notes about books you thought I'd like, an invitation to a library fundraiser you were organizing, a recipe for Dad's favorite cookies that you thought Jennifer might want to try. His voice was thick with emotion. She kept them all, Mom. She kept them and never gave them to me. I closed my eyes, thinking of all the occasions when I had wondered why Michael hadn't responded to something I had sent. All the times I had assumed he was simply too busy, too grown up to care about his mother's small gestures. There's more, Michael continued. I found a notebook where she documented every interaction between you and me. Dates, times, what we talked about. She was tracking our relationship like it was surveillance. Oh, Michael! And there are emails to her friends, Mom. Planning sessions about how to manage the Margaret situation. She talked about you like you were a problem to be solved. I felt something cold settle in my chest. The scope of Jennifer's campaign against me was larger than even I had realized. What are you going to do? I asked. I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to file for divorce immediately. Part of me thinks I should try to understand how she became this person. He paused. What would you do? I thought carefully before answering. I would ask myself whether the person you married still exists underneath all this behavior. And if she does, whether she's willing to do the hard work of becoming that person again. And if she's not, then you'll have your answer. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment thinking about the conversation with Jennifer. Her desperation was real, but so was her continued inability to see beyond her own perspective. Even in crisis, even with her world falling apart, she was still focused on managing the narrative rather than understanding the harm she had caused. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Mrs. Wilson, this is Dr. Rebecca Thompson from the National Institute on Aging. We've been following your story, and we're wondering if you might be interested in serving on our advisory board for elder advocacy initiatives. As I listened to Dr. Thompson explain their programs and goals, I realized that Jennifer's attack on me had opened a door I never would have found otherwise. The foundation I had created in response to her cruelty was going to help thousands of people. Speaking engagements were being scheduled. Resources were being developed. Jennifer had tried to make me disappear, and instead she had made me more visible than I had ever been. When I finally hung up, the apartment felt different. Not sad or lonely, but full of potential. Tomorrow there would be more calls, more interviews, more opportunities to turn my painful experience into meaningful change. But tonight, I simply sat with the knowledge that I had survived something designed to destroy me, and I had emerged stronger than before. The woman who had tried to erase me from my son's life had inadvertently given me a platform to help protect other families from experiencing the same pain. Sometimes justice comes in the most unexpected forms. 6 months after the incident at First National Bank, I stood in the offices of the Margaret Elizabeth Wilson Foundation, watching our first cohort of trained counselors graduate from their certification program. The space was modest but purposeful: 3 offices, a conference room, and a reception area staffed by volunteers who understood firsthand what elder abuse looked like. "Mrs. Wilson," said Patricia Chen, our program director, "we've had over 400 calls on our helpline this month. That's double what we had in January." I nodded, both pleased and saddened by the numbers. Each call represented a family in crisis, an elderly person feeling isolated and diminished by those who should have protected them. "How many cases have we been able to resolve?" I asked. 17 families have completed mediation successfully. 23 individuals have been connected with legal advocacy, and we've prevented at least 6 cases of financial exploitation through our early intervention program. Real people, real families, real change. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Can we do Sunday dinner this week? I have some things I'd like to discuss with you." Our Sunday dinners had resumed 3 months ago, tentatively at first, then with growing warmth as we rebuilt the relationship Jennifer had nearly destroyed. Michael was different now, more careful with trust, more aware of manipulation tactics, but also more appreciative of genuine affection. "Of course," I texted back. "Your grandmother's pot roast recipe? Perfect. And Mom, thank you for everything." The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Jennifer had moved back to her parents' house in Ohio, and according to Michael, she was working as a receptionist in a dental office while attending therapy twice a week. She had never apologized, never acknowledged the full scope of what she had done, but she had stopped trying to contact us. "Mrs. Wilson?" Patricia interrupted my thoughts. "There's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." I looked up to see a young woman in her 30s standing in our reception area, her hands twisted nervously in front of her. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her immediately. "My name is Amanda Foster," she said when I approached. "I'm a social worker here in town. I saw your story on the news, and I think I might have done something similar to what Jennifer did." My heart sank. "Tell me." "My husband's father lives with us. He's 81, and he was getting very involved in our decisions about the kids, about money, about everything." I started, managing his interactions with my husband, filtering phone calls, not passing along messages, making excuses for why he couldn't come to family events. She was crying now, quiet tears of recognition and shame. I told myself I was protecting our marriage, but watching your interviews, hearing you describe what Jennifer did, I realized I was doing the same thing. I was erasing a father from his son's life because I felt threatened by their closeness. "What made you realize this?" I asked gently. "Last week, my father-in-law asked my husband why he never returns his calls anymore. My husband was confused because he thought his father had stopped calling. When they compared notes, they figured out what I'd been doing. I led Amanda to my office and closed the door. "What would you like to do about it? I want to fix it. I want to learn how to share my husband's love instead of hoarding it. I want to stop being the kind of person who hurts elderly people out of my own insecurity." We talked for over an hour. By the time Amanda left, she had enrolled in our family mediation program and committed to individual counseling. She also had my direct number and a promise that the foundation would support her family through this healing process. "One person at a time," I murmured to myself as I watched her drive away. That's how real change happened. Sunday dinner with Michael had become a sacred time for both of us. We cooked together in his kitchen, sharing stories about our week, our work, our slowly healing relationship. Tonight, as we prepared the pot roast that had been his grandmother's specialty, Michael seemed unusually thoughtful. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," he said, peeling potatoes with the careful precision he brought to everything these days. "What about it? Whether I should forgive Jennifer? Whether you have forgiven her?" I considered the question while seasoning the roast. "Forgiveness isn't something you do for the other person," I said finally. "It's something you do for yourself, to stop carrying their poison in your heart. Have you forgiven her?" "I've forgiven the insecure young woman who felt threatened by her husband's relationship with his mother. I haven't forgiven the calculating person who systematically worked to destroy that relationship through lies and manipulation." Michael nodded slowly. "I think I understand the difference. Do you?" "The first person made mistakes out of fear. The second person made choices out of cruelty. And which person do you think Jennifer is?" He was quiet for a long time, focusing on the potatoes with unusual intensity. "I think she started as the first person, and became the second one, and I think she may have gone too far to come back. As we sat down to eat, Michael reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm selling the house." I looked up, surprised. Why? Because it never felt like home after Jennifer moved in. She changed everything about it. The colors, the furniture, the whole atmosphere. But more than that, it holds too many memories of the years when I let her convince me that you didn't matter. "Where will you live?" He smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached his eyes completely. "I put an offer on that little cottage on Elm Street. The one with the big front porch and the garden space." I knew the house. It was 3 blocks from my apartment, with beautiful morning light and room for the vegetable garden Michael had loved as a child. "It sounds perfect," I said. "I was hoping you might help me plan the garden, if you're not too busy saving the world." We both laughed, and the sound filled his kitchen with something that had been missing for far too long: genuine joy. After dinner, as we cleaned up together, Michael brought up something that had been weighing on his mind. "The foundation has gotten so much attention. Are you happy with how big it's become?" I thought about the question seriously. The foundation now had offices in 3 states, a staff of 15, and partnerships with legal aid societies across the country. We had been featured in major magazines, and I had spoken at conferences about elder advocacy and family dynamics. "I'm proud of the work we're doing," I said, "but what makes me happiest is the small moments. Amanda this afternoon, the grandmother in Phoenix who called to say her daughter finally acknowledged that her behavior was wrong. The family in Maine who went through mediation and came out stronger. It's ironic, isn't it? Jennifer tried to make you disappear, and instead she made you more visible than you ever would have been otherwise. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about justice." As Michael drove me home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed since that terrible morning at the bank. Jennifer had lost her marriage, her reputation, and her sense of superiority, but more importantly, she had lost the power to define other people's worth based on her own insecurities. Michael had lost his illusions about trust and manipulation, but he had gained a deeper understanding of genuine love and respect. He was more cautious now, but also more appreciative of real relationships. And I had lost my quiet, invisible life, but I had gained a purpose that filled me with energy and hope every single day. The next morning, I arrived at the foundation office to find Patricia Chen waiting with a cup of coffee and a satisfied smile. "We got the grant," she announced. "The Department of Health and Human Services approved our proposal for a national elder advocacy program. We'll be able to train counselors in all 50 states." I sat down heavily in my chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we were about to undertake. "That's wonderful," I said, "and terrifying." "You know what the best part is?" Patricia continued. "The program will be called the Margaret Wilson Model for Family Reconciliation. Your name will be associated with healing families for generations." I thought about that as I looked around our modest office. 6 months ago, I had been a forgotten widow whose own family was embarrassed by her existence. Today, I was helping families across the country rebuild relationships damaged by manipulation and abuse. "There's something else," Patricia said, handing me a letter. "This came in yesterday's mail." The return address showed a name I didn't recognize, but the handwriting looked familiar. Inside was a brief note. "Mrs. Wilson, I've been following the Foundation's work through the website. I want you to know that I've been in therapy for 4 months, working on understanding why I did what I did to you and Michael. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that watching you turn something terrible into something beautiful has taught me more about dignity and grace than anything else in my life. The therapist says I may never fully understand what drove me to be so cruel to someone who had never been anything but kind to me, but I'm trying to learn how to be a better person, even if it's too late to fix what I broke. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like, Jennifer." I read the letter twice, then handed it to Patricia. "What do you think?" she asked after reading it. "I think it's a beginning," I said. "Not an ending, not a resolution, but a beginning." That afternoon, I walked to the cottage on Elm Street where Michael was working in what would become his new garden. He was planting tomatoes in the late spring sunshine, his sleeves rolled up and dirt under his fingernails, looking more content than I had seen him in years. "How's the foundation today?" he asked, standing up to hug me. "Growing," I said. "Always growing." "And how's my mother today?" I looked around at the cottage with its fresh paint and promising garden. At my son who was learning to trust again. At the life we were rebuilding together. Peaceful, I said. Finally, completely peaceful. As we worked together in the garden, planting seeds that would grow into something nourishing and beautiful, I realized that this was what victory looked like, not the destruction of an enemy, but the creation of something better than what existed before. Jennifer had tried to erase me from my family's story. Instead, she had given me the opportunity to help write new stories for thousands of families across the country. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, loving deeply, and using your pain to prevent others from suffering the same loss. The seeds we planted that day would grow strong in the rich soil of forgiveness, understanding, and hope. And that was enough.